Okay. All right, I think we are live. Good afternoon, everyone. It is 4:02 on Monday, March the 6th, 2023. And this is a meeting of the Public Safety Subcommittee of the House Judiciary Committee. And so thank you all so much for being here this afternoon. We have 3 bills on our agenda. So first I see we have Vice Chair Moon. So we'll start with his bill, which is House Bill 162.
Actually, I just have a question. Could we give Vice Chair Moon just a little bit of time? We might have an additional amendment to send out to the members, if that's okay, Chair Williams.
Yeah, that's fine. I wanted to give him the courtesy of going first, but if he needs like a few more minutes.
Yep, and an amendment might be coming out to everybody. Just some minor tweaks to the amendment they've already received.
Okay, all right. Well, then the next bill that is on our agenda is House Bill 744, which is sponsored by Delegate Hill. And so, and she has 2 bills. So she has House Bill 744 and House Bill 745. So we'll start first with House Bill 744, which is the under criminal law, public safety, interference with public safety answering points. And so Claire, I see, is here, and I think she is the counsel for this bill. And I don't know, Claire, if you want to just give a brief summary again, just to the members of the committee about what this bill does.
Okay. This bill prohibits a person from committing a violation of Section 7302 of the criminal law article, which has to do with unauthorized access to computers and related material, with the intent to interrupt or impair the functioning of a public safety answering point, or that interrupts or impairs the functioning of a public safety answering point. And then the bill imposes penalties for these violations.
Thank you, Claire. And I think I see the bill sponsor here. I know that during the testimony, it was, I think the bill sponsor mentioned that the impetus behind this bill was based from the report that was done by the Maryland New Generation 911 Commission. And so I think my office earlier today emailed all of the subcommittee members a copy of that report, just in case you wanted to see the report there. And so I know we have the bill sponsor here. I don't know if we have any other individuals who are here from on this particular bill. I think we had asked someone from the Maryland Emergency.
Anna Sierra. Anna Sierra is part of the Maryland Emergency. She's in the waiting room. Would you like for me to let her in?
Yes, if we could let her in, that would be great. Little list here. And was there anyone else also in the waiting room on 744 by chance? I can't remember if there was a third person.
Yes, well, they aren't in the waiting room, but they were, we requested for them to be here. Meredith Wiesel with ADL, but she couldn't join us today. Yeah, so we have Anna.
All right. And so I don't know if folks have any questions either for Miss Sierra or for the bill sponsor on this particular bill. But like I said, I know it was sort of based on, it was based on the commission's report to kind of deal with matters as it relates to our emergency systems here in the state. Nope. Okay. Well, I have some questions. Go ahead. Sorry, Delegate Crutchfield.
Thank you.
Okay.
Since I didn't get a chance to read the commission's report, can someone just summarize it in maybe 2 or 3 sentences?
Yes.
To how we got to this point? Thank you.
Delegate Hill, I know you're here and I know you were a member of the commission. If you want to just kind of just give us a little bit of an update about how
Sure.
we got here.
Thank you. So the commission worked over 3 years with the primary task of updating Maryland emergency answering systems statewide towards a number of different goals, but largely built around technology that's coming out. And we looked at a number of different issues. And one of the things that we looked at included functional issues with the PSAP, the public safety answering positions. And this is one of the recommendations that came out of that work group. But the overall intent of the NG 911 Commission was to ensure that within a relatively short period of time, all of Maryland's jurisdictions have interoperative communications and up-to-date systems, so that when someone is in a 5-story building, they can be identified on what floor and where their location is. We have technology for that. We wanted to make sure that our systems are updated so that if you want to send a text, you want to send a photograph or something like that, something other than a call, we'd be able to receive that information. We wanted to make sure that our staffing and manpower issues were adequately addressed and that people were being paid right. So the commission looked at a broad range of issues, but when it came to the functioning, one of the main issues that we looked at were ways that these systems are disrupted. And that led to both 744 and 745. And the bills have been introduced at least 2 of the last 3 years. And when the decision was made last year to put a work group together to look at this in a little bit more detail and really look at the statutes and determine what are appropriate punishments, how do we make sure that we're not, taking people who are jokesters and pranksters and getting them wrapped up in what could be some pretty serious penalties. So that group did that, and I was not a part of that group, but that report is what Melanie had sent out as well. And I think, Madam Chair, you got a copy of that report too. But what they came up with, and delegates Bartlett and Nunez and Lopez were on that commission. In this piece, 744 and 745 were the specific legislative recommendations that are being presented here and in the Senate to address these targeted, deliberate, malicious disruptions of our systems to make sure that we don't lose lives.
Okay.
So hopefully that was helpful.
All right. Any additional questions? Okay. Oh, yes, Delegate Valentine.
Thank you. I just had one question. I was looking at 744 and 745. And in 745, the provision for a first offense for a juvenile, but I don't see that provision in 744. Is it only in 745?
It's only in 745.
Thank you.
And Frank, if you can mute yourself, and we're glad that you joined us. All right, thank you. So I guess one of my questions, Delegate Simpson.
Has there been any consideration about doing some sort of public service or like an educational piece with this? Just of what the penalties will be and, making sure that people are aware of how serious it is and what the consequences would be.
So not specific to this particular legislation, but we do, Next Gen 911 does have a public service and education piece around some of the other initiatives. So I'm sure if you wanted to amend something on to that effect, that would be fine. But I think part of the problem with that, the reason that a lot of people don't hear a lot about how frequently these cases occur, when we spoke to law enforcement, one of their concerns was creating copycats. So when we spoke to them, they said that these are a lot more frequent than they want to discuss.
Got it.
And so this is maybe not the best thing to be saying to the public, hey, you could, by making a couple phone calls and getting a bot, you can, really mess people up. And in fact, there was an article in the last week. Well, I guess there was a follow-up of an article that talked about, a guy who was arrested for actually having a bot that did this. It was designed to tie systems up, and people would, go online and hire his system, and they'd say, this is the system I want to tie up, and he would guarantee him that he could mess up systems.
Mhm. Okay. Thank
So he's an entrepreneurial kind of guy.
you. Most criminals are, and it'd be great if they use their talents for good instead of evil. But so I guess one of the questions I have is about the penalties. And so I'm gonna just do 744 first. And so I noticed that for the first offense, in terms of a person who engages with the intent to interrupt or impair the functioning of the public safety answering point, that is a felony, as the bill is stated, subject to imprisonment not exceeding 5 years or fine not exceeding 25,000. And I guess my question, oh, this is not the time for my computer to try to restart. Let's stop doing that. Oh, shoot. Okay, if I jump off, I will try to jump back on. I am getting this thing from OIS saying they want to restart my computer. And so, and I guess that's my question, kind of how did you guys come up with the penalties for that? I know the next section that was added is if they actually, I guess the first one is if they attempt to interrupt
Right.
the system, but they're
Right.
not successful with interrupting the system. And then the third one is they actually are successful with interrupting the system, then that's subject to a felony of 10 years with a fine not exceeding 50,000. And so I guess that's my question, kind of what the thought process was with regards
Well,
to the penalty.
Sure, Madam Chair. So I think, first of all, understand that these are the swabbing things are, in the other bill, pretty well defined. They're sort of a beginning and end and a stop point. These are a little bit less well defined. These are any kind of disruption. So these are the kind of systems that have taken down hospitals, taken down school systems.
Mhm.
We think about it in terms of PSAPs, and lots of calls are coming in so that they can't answer the true emergencies. That's what kind of got us. But this is it's a much broader area than simply disrupting, the local 911 operators for 10 or 20 minutes. Okay. And so you're correct. The distinction between C5 and C6 is that C5 is an attempt to disrupt, but they weren't successful. And then C6, it's like, yeah, you actually did disrupt, you caused disruption. People couldn't get through who needed to get through. And the important thing is these are not minimums, right? So they're maximum sentences, which allows the court to take into account all the extenuating circumstances that are there and decide, how significant this is and how much, how serious this needs to be treated. And I think, essentially that's what we want to do. We want to say, this is not a joke, this is real stuff, but give that leeway to be able to fairly adjudicate a range of players and frankly, a very wide range of attacks. If that helps.
Yeah, it does. I guess, and I was looking at the part that was already currently in the code. And so I guess under C4, it talks about that the person, and this is just general, I guess, kind of maybe computers in general, that the person may not commit an act to intent to interrupt or impair the functioning. And it goes on to different sections like, a healthcare facility, since you mentioned our hospitals, a public school, or the storage of electricity or natural gas. And then I looked at the penalties kind of associated with those. And it seems like the penalties somewhat associated with those vary. Well, let me see here. So person who violates C4, well, no, those are So for one, it talks about, I guess, the cost of the loss. So if the loss is $10,000 or more, it's a penalty, a felony. But if the loss is $10,000 or less, then it's a misdemeanor. And so I don't know, I guess I was just trying to, I mean, one of the things, just trying to square what you've proposed kind of with other parts of that section. And just kind of making sure that we're kind of being comparable with our penalties for like things, if that makes sense.
Right. So if you look under on page 1, 7302, so line 17, this is about accessing, may not intentionally, willfully, or without authorization, access, attempt to access, or cause to be accessed or exceed your authorization. All right. So that's not disrupting a system. It's logging in with somebody else's, login. It's swiping, stealing a card and swiping in. Copy, attempt to copy, possess, or attempt to possess the contents of a computer database. So this particular area of the statutes is more than disruption. It talks about different means by which people have unauthorized access. When we get down, so number 2, cause a malfunction of a computer network, right? That's just shutting the thing down to damage it. That's not causing it to malfunction, it's causing it to be inaccessible, to close the whole thing down. And so the penalties escalate because the significance and the severity and the reach of the violation escalates.
Okay. All right. Does anyone else have any questions either for the bill sponsor? And we also have Anna Sierra with us for some of those who may join late with the Maryland Emergency. So I don't want to mess it up, Miss Sierra. I don't know if it's the Maryland Emergency Association or agency, but yes, Delegate Valentine.
Thank you. This question is for Delegate Hill. I didn't see in the fiscal note, have they had any successful investigations in these type of cases, or how big the problem is as far as they've been able to charge anyone under the statute as it is now? Did the task force or the work group get any of that information statewide?
I don't have that information. I'm sure we can get it for you. And I don't know if Ms. Sierra has any of that information, but I don't. We certainly, so let me just leave it at that. So if you want, and so what you're specifically looking for is how often these are occurring statewide?
And if they're able to be investigated, I'm sure it's a difficult and probably complex investigation, especially if they're out of state to begin with. So I was just trying to see the scope of the problem or how they've been able to successfully investigate them up to this point.
Well, again, some of these that we're covering here, again, the hack at MDH was then followed when Maryland Department of Health got a ransomware hack. It was then followed by an attempt at DDoS. That kind of stuff begins when it's at that level. It starts falling under the FBI.
Okay.
So it takes it to a whole nother level. And so I can ask, I'm not sure if we have, and this also is not just public networks, right? So if you'll notice, even though this came out of the Next Gen 911, and we were really worrying about our public safety answering points, this is sitting in a part of statute that deals with all kinds of other systems. And what we're saying here is that of all the systems that you can mess up, when you mess up a PSAP, you're not just disrupting their ability to function, but you're potentially causing immeasurable harm to dozens and hundreds of people, depending on how long it's down, who actually need to access that because of emergencies.
Absolutely. And I had that conversation with some members of my local 911 system last week about this and to get their input on this as well. So I appreciate all of the work you've done.
Thank you. Ms. Sierra, yes, thank you for correcting me in the chat. Department of Emergency Management, thank you. Did you have anything that you wanted to add?
No, ma'am, I think we're good. We don't have any specific information regarding the delegate's question on number of investigations or capable cases regarding investigations. The AG's office is the one that staffed the task force. So they would probably be the best ones to reach out to for the data.
Got it. Okay. All right, my computer's going to shut down in 57 seconds.
Okay, Madam Chair, do you want me to get that information? Or Delegate, did you want that information?
Yeah, if you could get that information, I think that would be helpful. When I shut down, I'm going to try to come back on really quickly, but I do see, I think Holly, I think I saw an email with a copy of the amendment for House Bill 162. Is that correct?
Yes, so everybody has the most recent one. It was just sent out by Brianna. So and she can also screen share. Is her computer also going to restart?
No,
No, it's not.
Okay,
OIS
good.
fixed it. I didn't know, Delegate, that yours was also restarting.
You know, OIS
OIS.
out a thing saying they were generally going to be doing this on Mondays. I did not think it would happen right now. So if you could share your screen, Brianna, with the amendment so that the members of the committee can review it. And if you guys can just kind of go through the amendment, and I'm going to hop back on, literally it's going to 1 and I'm about to be done.
Yep, is Vice Chair Moon, are you here with us?
Yes.
You want to talk about what we just got and the amendment from the comptroller?
Yeah, so the
And
comptroller.
I just want to let her bring it up just to make sure, because we sent the previous one. Everyone, this is the most recent. So make sure you have the right one if you're looking at it on your computer.
So the main thing this amendment does is it brings the MVA in and it clarifies the comptroller verification to indicate that social security numbers aren't being used. And there's 2 reasons for this that they flagged. One is there's apparently trouble with the IRS and the feds if you use social security data for something other than tax purposes. So their lawyers wanted that out. And as to the MVA, MVA, especially with Real ID, apparently has a larger data set than our tax collectors. And so suggested that that would be a useful way of verifying identity. So we put that into this. We went ahead and agreed with that suggestion. And I know there are multiple calls out to MVA, both from Senator Hedelman and from the comptroller's office to touch base on this. Unfortunately, I haven't gotten the verification from MVA yet, but given the timing, I would ask to move the bill with all of this worked out stuff on it, and I'll promise to catch MVA before we vote, and it'll give us at least the opportunity to hold it at that point if we need to tweak it for their liking. But otherwise, the rest of this has been looked at by the parties.
Okay, I don't know if anybody has any questions for this, for Vice Chair Moon. Okay, and then Vice Chair, I think we should wait for Chair Williams to pop back on before we vote. So,
I'm sorry, this is Delegate Souls.
yes.
My apologies, I had something going on in my office. Is it possible to tell me if we voted on HB 744?
So, did they vote on it?
Yeah, Delegate Hill's bill.
I don't believe so, no.
Okay, isn't that, okay, so we just skipped around, I apologize.
We're just skipping, unfortunately, Vice Chair Williams' computer restarted.
Yeah, I was there.
So,
Yeah, no,
so
I was there. I was
I
just
think
like,
we're just delaying a little bit while we wait for her to pop back.
okay, okay, perfect, got
Did
it.
she have one of those critical software updates or something like that? I hate when they do that.
Yeah.
I had one
Okay.
earlier today, so I think everybody's
Oh.
computer will probably have it at some point this afternoon,
Oh,
unfortunately.
wow. Oh,
Yeah.
oh, goodness. Okay.
You think that it would happen like at 2 a.m. in the morning when everyone's asleep or something, but
Well, can I answer any questions about this gun suicide bill while we're waiting? I'm happy to noodle around on it if folks still have any questions.
Can I just confirm, so we're moving away from the state police and going to the state health department, correct?
Correct.
And then the verification is going to be done through MVA in coordination with the comptroller's office. Is that how I read it?
Yeah, so MDH is really running the show here since they already maintain the database of prohibited purchasers. I guess the difference is when it's involuntarily, the names are coming in involuntarily, you don't have to screen the identity in quite the same way as if they're coming in through the internet. And so as they handle the data coming in through the internet or whatever, they'll still get, the identifying information. But at that point, they don't want to just put it on the list to go to MSP along with the other people who are not allowed to have guns. There's a pause point where they will take the information that was given to them by the applicant and just check with the comptroller and MVA that this is legitimate information. Then they'll send it on as they normally would to get added to the do not purchase list. And the backstop against the process here is that there's a criminal penalty of a year if there was a fraudulent application made against someone.
I did see that. Now, is there any follow-up after it's submitted and verified or through their process, like a follow-up back to the initial applicant to verify that?
Yes, the applicant will be notified that they're being put on the list. And I can't remember, there's some timelines for all of this to happen.
I think that was 5 days, was it not?
Yeah.
And I was kind of unclear on how that process, was that in writing? Were they reaching out via electronically or how they would do that?
Yeah, I think it's going to be same input. So I think I have to go back and look what data points come in. But yes, they'll get a letter. I also think there's the possibility of, this is going to, I think for some time and maybe forever, this is going to be a low number of applicants. I think in the real world, you will see the opportunity for a lot more manual verification and human contact than what's on paper here. Just because if it's, one person a month, which I think is the kind of volume we're looking at, they'll be able to do that. If the volume is larger than anticipated, then we'll have to revisit that or, go back to the statutory minimum. But again, I think what's going to happen in practice is going to be, there will be the opportunity for more than what's minimally specified in law. What's in the amendment here is intentionally trying to give the agencies a little bit of flexibility in implementation, so we're not spelling out every detail. But we did just want to be sensitive to the concern in other states about fraudulent applications.
And that's my biggest concern, sir. It's I'm especially when you get into that known family member dynamic and people being retaliatory and domestic situations. And I just see that all spiraling out. And I just want that verification that to take away the fraudulent. That's my biggest concern with this.
Yeah, I mean, I hope we captured that concern through the verification attempt and the criminal penalty. And I guess the only other thing I'll say, if we were in a state that didn't have a red flag law, I think there might be greater cause for concern about a bill like this, because the concern would be a third party taking away someone's gun rights, right? But since we have the red flag law already in place where a third party can do that, it's my belief that we're actually, since we already ripped that Band-Aid off. And so the concern you have, I would say is really towards that bill, because in a state that has both of them, this ought to be a lesser concern. A third party is already doing that in Maryland, granted with checks and balances, but we have whole states where a third party can't do that. So we're just trying to give the individual the same rights, similar rights to what a third party already has in the state, if that makes sense.
And I guess the red flag, I'm not as concerned with that because they have to go in person, swear that out in person against
Right.
someone. So I'm certainly thinking in that regard where that I don't have as much of a concern under the red flag statute. The only other question I have, and it was brought up in the state police one document, was how does this capture firearms that are already owned by an individual who does this? Where do they fall into?
It doesn't. We made a conscious decision not to try and do anything about that. So this would only be for acquiring the new regulated firearm.
Mhm.
You know, I understand that's a little weird if someone's preventing themselves to say, hey, I shouldn't be buying guns. Hey, well, buddy, you already have some. I mean, there's nothing we can do about that unless folks want to be in the business of adding to the confiscation policies in the state.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, I'm back now. I see you, Delegate Tomlinson, but Delegate Simpson has her hand up, and then so we'll go to her, and then we'll go to you, Delegate Tomlinson.
My question, I like the bill, obviously. I think that people should be able to voluntarily get on a list to make sure that they can't purchase guns. I just want to know, how does it actually go into effect? Like, how do the gun dealers know that they're on this list?
They're already querying a database for people who are not involuntarily not allowed to purchase firearms. You know, they had a mental episode and were involuntarily committed to a hospital, something like that. There's already an MDH administered list that gets sent up. And so that the state police, when someone's attempting to purchase a regulated firearm, will query that list and get a green light or a red light as to whether someone's on it. And so as to the implementation, MDH is really just adding people to that list with a slightly different, data tag so that we know these are not people who are having existing firearms confiscated.
Thank you.
Welcome back, Delegate Munoz. She had the same issue I had. Delegate Tomlinson.
Vice Chair Moon. So is this supposed to be kind of like almost like a version of the Maryland Lottery's voluntary exclusion program? I mean, is it kind of the same premise?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the concept is there are some people who will have a moment of clarity and realize they may want to obstruct themselves from self-harm when they're not having a moment of clarity. And you're right that this exists in gambling, where people can ban themselves from gambling, and that's administered in a way that the various casinos do, in fact, try and block those people out. So that's the concept here. If you're having a moment of clarity after some depressive episode or whatever the case may be, you could add yourself to the list, just like the problem gamblers.
Do you know if they, because I know that you mentioned that you're probably thinking maybe we're talking about the firearm with this bill. You're saying maybe there'll probably be like one person maybe that signs up a month. Do you know with the gambling program, like what kind of numbers or success they've had with that, just roughly?
That I don't know, unfortunately. I'll try. You know what? It's a good question. I'll go over to our friends in Ways and Means and see if I can get them to send over that information. And the 1 a month number was based on what Virginia was pulling in after 3 years of this program.
Okay.
The once a month, you're saying that was based off of Virginia?
Yeah, Virginia had this for like 3 years and has maybe 36 people that are
Okay.
on their list. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
After
Okay.
3 years.
This is not a huge bill.
Yeah.
I want to keep
And
saying
Virginia's
that.
a slightly
This is
larger
a very
state.
small bill.
All
Hmm.
right. Any other questions? Either use your raise your hand feature or your actual hand. I'm trying to scroll through to see. Karen, I'm assuming your hand is still up from the last time. I'm sorry, Delegate Simpson. I'm assuming your hand's still up from previously. All right. Well, if there aren't any additional questions for Vice Chair Moon, I will entertain a motion to move favorable with the amendment.
Move favorable with amendments.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All right, there's been a motion and a second. Is there any additional discussion? All right, seeing none, I will go ahead and I guess do a roll call. So first I have Delegate Conway. Oh, hold on, I'm sorry, Holly, do we need to adopt?
No,
the
you can
amendment?
just do hands.
Do we need to do a motion to adopt the amendment? I skipped that part.
Oh,
Let's
I
go
move
ahead and do that and then just do, you don't have to do a roll call. We can just do like we do usually, a hand vote.
Okay, so
Madam Chair, I'll move to adopt the amendment.
Okay, is there a second?
just a point of clarification. I think I moved a bill with as amended. Originally, that was the original motion.
I think so, but let's just first to be clear, just in case, that's okay. But yeah, I think you did, Delegate Holmes.
I think Crutchville seconded, but okay. However you wanted to do it.
Okay, all in favor of the amendment, if you can just raise your hand. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Actually, Brianna, can you remove the amendment from the screen? That way it'll make it easier for me to see everyone.
Yes, 1 second.
Okay. All right, there we go. That makes it easier to see my Brady Bunch screens. Okay, so I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in favor, 10 in favor, 11 in favor of the amendment. Those against the amendment? 1. Okay. All right, the amendment passes. And then let's move favorable on the bill, sorry, as amended. Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, move favorable on the bill as amended.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, and all in favor, if you can just raise your hands. Okay, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 in favor. And then those opposed, if you can just raise your hand. 1, 2, oppose. Okay. All right, so the bill moves out of the subcommittee favorable as amended, 10-2. I think that was my count. All right, so thank you guys so much. Thank you, Vice Chair Moon. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, and so then let's go back to 744. I don't know if we'll get to 745 as well. But I don't know if anyone has any additional questions on 744. Questions, comments, concerns? All right. Does anyone wish to make a motion on 744? Or have any questions for council? At once.
I'll move it for the delegate. Move favorable.
All right, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, is there any additional discussion on 744?
Madam,
Yes.
I can just share some information I just pulled up since there was a question before you take the vote.
Oh, sure.
Telephone denial of service attacks, lessons learned from a public safety answering point. and I can send this to you, but this is throughout 2020 and 2021, a local public safety answering point. This is not Maryland. Responded to daily telephone denials of service attacks impacting operations. To date, these attacks have only impacted the agency's 10-digit non-emergency lines, which are often provided to other agents, and it says upwards of 12 times a day is what this one study was looking at. So I'll share that with you and continue to look for information, certainly for the floor, and I mean, for your committee vote if it passes out of subcommittee, so that that can be answered.
Okay. And Delegate Crutchfield, I see you have your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to make sure I understand these penalties again. I guess I'm just concerned about, okay, I do know it looks like there are misdemeanor penalties, 3 years and up to 1,000, but what about the felony piece again? Can you just go over those penalties? I mean, where those are coming from, or how we got to this point?
You're muted, Delegate Hill.
The report of a task force, to give that specifically to you. And I'm going to read from the, if you refer to the fiscal note.
Okay.
Okay. On page 2.
Okay, yes.
It talks about if the aggregate amount of loss is, all right, so the bottom paragraph, a person may not commit any of these computer-related offenses with the intent to interrupt or impair the functioning of the state government, a natural gas or electric service device or system owned, operated, or controlled by the state by a person other than a public service company. So this is not a PSAP. And it goes on to say, if the aggregate amount of the loss associated with violation of this prohibition is 10,000 or more, a violator is guilty of a felony punishable by imprisonment for up to 10 years and a maximum fine of $100,000. If the aggregate amount of the loss is less than 10,000, a violator is guilty of a misdemeanor punishable by imprisonment for up to 5 years and a maximum fine of $25,000. So I think in looking at that, which is disrupting significant services, but it's not disrupting the one thing we all depend on to get our emergency services when the house is burning down, when there's a bomb threat, when someone has to go. So I think it's in looking at these other things and saying, if we disrupt the PSAP, we can't even begin to deal with this other stuff. And trying to set a penalty that is in line with, but elevated from what these fines are.
Okay, so sort of a tier with factors is what
it's a tiered approach.
Okay.
Delegate Tomlinson, I see. Oh, sorry, Delegate Crutchfield, did you have any additional?
No, thank you. Thank you.
Delegate Tomlinson.
This question's for Delegate Hill. You said this came out of the your work with the what is it, the 911 commission?
The 911, and then it came out of a task force that was put together over the last interim to specifically look at the current statutory penalties for related offenses and come up with recommendations that were in line with and appropriate to those. For both of these.
Okay. So did my predecessor, Susan Delegate Krebs, was she involved in this, I imagine?
Yes, Delegate Krebs was on the 911 commission for all 3 years, and it was very critical to its success.
Cool. Well, in honor of Delegate Krebs, if it is time to make a motion, I'm happy to make a motion.
I think we already have a motion.
Oh, sorry. My apologies.
So we're just in the discussion portion at this point, but it's
sorry about
already
that.
been moved
And I appreciate that.
All right, any additional questions? All right, well, seeing no additional questions, I guess we can just go forward with a vote. And I was told we could just raise our hands. So if you just want to raise your hands if you're in favor of moving forward. Okay. Oh, 1, 2, okay, boxes are moving. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 in favor. Okay, well then the bill moves favorably. All right, so that's 744. Okay, and then next we have 745. And I know it's already 447. But this is the anti-swatting bill. And I think Claire is still with us. Claire, can you give us like a brief summary again about this bill? I know this also came out of the commission report, and then there was also the swatting task force report, which my office sent out to all the committee members as well. Oh, you're muted, Claire.
Sorry. The bill establishes prohibitions related to the making of a false statement, report, or complaint of an emergency or alleging the commission of a crime to a governmental emergency report recipient. Violators are subject to criminal penalties and are civilly liable. Yeah, so that's the gist of it.
Okay, and I see some hands raised. Delegate Taylor.
My apologies, that was held over from the last vote.
Oh, okay. Delegate Crutchfield, I saw you had your hand up, but then it went away. I didn't know if you had a question as well.
No question.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions about the I call it the anti-swatting bill, just for, simplicity. And this one also with the penalties, for the first, it has a tiered approach as well, just like the other bill. And so if someone violates section B1, which is the person making the false statement, but doesn't result in any type of death or emotional distress or anything like that, that's a misdemeanor, if I'm reading this correctly, subject up to a max of 3 years or $2,000. But if the person that is engaging in the swatting activity, if their act results in bodily harm to an individual, I'm sorry, wrong section, result in serious physical injury, severe emotional distress, or death to the person as an approximate result of the conduct of that is a felony, subject to imprisonment of 10 years or $20,000 or both. So Delegate Valentine, I see your hand.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. My question does go back to the differentiation between juvenile and adult, and I'm referring to the Chiefs of Police Association letter as to their opposition to that, and why it would be required that the juvenile have the first time be a civil matter or a civil violation. That would be my question. Why is that needed?
So I think what we were looking at is that a lot of this swatting stuff started in the gaming community. And it started as truly innocent prankers. Wouldn't it be funny if? And there's still a significant amount of teenagers who will swat other teenagers, not understanding the seriousness of it. And I know when this bill was before this committee last year, one of the concerns in this committee was whether there was not enough allowance for the so-called innocent prankster.
Sure.
And that's why, because kids, this is the kind of stuff kids do. The other stuff, a lot more serious, a lot more sophisticated, have to be really deliberately working on this. This is the kind of stuff that kids think is funny. And we've spent so much effort in the last, half a dozen to a dozen years, trying to make sure that we don't take kids who need to be redirected and latch them with something that's going to follow them for a long time, even though they're juveniles and it's expulsion, all that. So we're just trying to be consistent with how we've been treating juveniles. And it's just saying, you get that warning. This is not a joke. This is funny. You get called up in court, but you're going to be in the juvenile court. But that's serious business. And for a juvenile who truly isn't trying to do something malicious, hopefully that's sufficient to deter them from coming back and doing it again. They don't need a felony conviction. They don't need to do hard jail time. They don't need to be in jail with, grown ass offenders. I guess that's not the word I should say in public. But.
I understand. I was just looking at the example in the one document that was in the literature about the one that did it purposely, I think in December of 22, that was a 17-year-old. So I was just referring to that. That was kind of my concern, why it was a little different. I'm very familiar with squatting, having responded to those and understand it being a problem. And I'll even go one step further. I was talking with the 911 center, but also some deputies this past week about these bills, very good bills. And the flip side, not only to the public, the danger to the public and where these folks are being responded to, the SWAT response, but also to our law enforcement, who they receive so many, they become so routine, I guess is the word that was used, that when they do end up being a real response, they're not prepared for it. And it kind of, so there's both ends of it, that why this is desperately needed. So I thank you again.
Thank you.
I do have a
Thank
question.
you for your service.
I do have a question for council, and actually I meant to ask this question on 744, so it might be too late on that. Is if someone is convicted either of the misdemeanor portion or the felony portion of this, is this an expungible offense?
No. Well, on 745?
Yeah, on
No.
745, it's not.
No, because this is a newly created crime. And there's not any provision of this bill that's adding it to the statute in the criminal procedure article that allows expungement of convictions.
Okay. And I guess that same would be true for 744.
That 744 was an existing crime.
Got it.
Well, no, because the two criminal provisions in 744 are felonies. And those definitely are not felonies that you can get expunge a conviction of.
Okay. All right. Okay, so that answers my question on that. Did anyone have any additional questions? All right. Is there a motion on 745?
Move favorable.
There's a second. All right.
A second.
Second.
Thank you. And we can continue discussion. I don't know if people have any additional questions. Yes, Delegate Schmidt.
No, I'm good. I'm just moving favorable. That's all.
Oh, okay. I saw your hand. No.
Sorry about that.
It's
Little
okay.
ahead of schedule. Sorry about that.
It's okay. Is there any additional discussion? I don't know if people have questions, concerns, but now's the time to raise them if you do. No. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think I like Delegate Hill stated, I mean, I think I'm okay for the carve out with the kids. You know, I do agree that this is kind of the silly stuff that sometimes kids think is funny, and that they will do. And so I'm perfectly okay with that provision in the bill. You know, because we definitely don't want to, or at least want to attempt to deter people from falsely kind of reaching out to our law enforcement with regards to items that aren't true. So,
Madam Chair,
yes.
since Delegate Munoz was actually on the swatting task force, I was just wondering if she had anything to add or if I misrepresented anything that she wanted to clarify.
Oh, okay.
No, Delegate Hill, you've done a wonderful job. And I was just going to say, I hear people concerned about the juvenile piece, and that's actually a big piece that I was involved in. And we heard so many stories about young people and where this originated from. And wow, this is an incredibly serious issue that has real life, consequences where people are being killed and children are being traumatized. And it's, absolutely horrific. We did want to give children the one shot, if they think, oh, well, I'm ordering a pizza to someone's house. Oh, I'm going to call 911 on them. And then once they get that one shot, they learn their lesson. And if it happens again, it's going to be a different story. But I was one of the people on the task force who felt very uncomfortable having such strong penalties for a first offense for children of something of this nature, because I thought, robbing someone at gunpoint with a gun is something that any of us can understand what we're doing, right? Even whatever age we are, but picking up a phone and making a silly phone call, I thought as a mother, some children could see that differently. And as long as there's no bodily harm, no one's injured, that was a big part of my contribution on the task force, was to make sure we weren't, locking up children and throwing away the key when they didn't, fully understand what they were participating in. So.
And Delegate Valentine, I saw you had your hand up, but then you took it down. So
Delegate Munoz answered my question.
Oh, okay. All right. Very good. Very good. Okay. Well, are there any other questions, or is there any additional discussion? Nope. All right. Well, I guess we'll call the question then, or call the motion, move the motion, and take a vote. So all those in favor, if you want to just raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Oh, yes. Hi, Delegate Phillips, you're back. Okay. All right. And I don't see, that's everyone. I don't think anyone's opposed, but if you are, raise your hand. Nope. Okay. All right. So 745 passed unanimously out of subcommittee, and we'll go to the full committee for a vote. And so we were managed to get all 3 bills done in an hour. I'm super excited. It's only 4:59.
I thank you very much for inviting me and for your questions and for your support. Thank you all.
All righty. Thank you. All right. And then that's it right now for the subcommittee, but I'm sure there'll be more forthcoming. So just stay tuned, and we will be back at a minimum probably next week.